up your engine. Well, here's a V8 Lexus SC430 that's fun and sporty, and since it was used, it was relatively cheap. Originally, this 2003 Lexus SC430 was $63,000. But my customer bought it a year ago for about a tenth of it, $6,500. Sharp looking car, and he did this. He painted it. And I think he did a pretty good job painting those wheels. They're kind of cool. See old metal convertible that pops down. Clean car. And as we look inside, leather's still in decent shape. You could clean it and re-dye it like I do. And even though it's a bit messy, hey, the wood still looks good. And yeah, it's the typical sporty car. Look, the back seat is for tiny people. There's not a lot of room in the back seat. I don't know why they just didn't make it a two-seater, but you know, they put these goofy seats in the back. Now we'll start it up. Typical Lexus, starts right up. Does have a code for the tire pressure monitoring service. Typical on any 18-year-old car. Let's face it, it's 18 years old. Each tire has a tire pressure monitoring sensor on it, run by the battery inside the sensor. They just go bad after all those years. A lot of guys aren't going to spend the money to replace them all. They'll just ignore that and check the tire pressure with an air gauge. You're getting a $65,000 car for $6,500. You know, nothing's going to be perfect. But even as old as it is, you can see, got vehicle speed control, traction control. We'll take it for a spin. See how many of the original 301 horsepower this thing has. Still quiet and smooth, even though it's got 156,040 miles on it. All right, let's step on it and see what it can do. It can still get up and go. It's not a complete race car. There's no arguing that. It's got a little hesitation now because it's old. But that's because it needs an alternator. You can see the alternator lights on for the battery. It needs an alternator. That's what I'm fixing on this. Plus, it's almost out of gasoline. Not a good idea to get an old car and run it low on gasoline. You run them low on gasoline, you can suck crud from the bottom of the tank. Don't do that. You get an old car, pretend quarter of a tank left is empty, and then always refill it. You don't want to tempt fate with one of these expensive cars. Now, as we look under the hood, Lexus 4.3 variable valve timing V8 engine. And you might notice my little jump starter addition. That's because the alternator's going out and I'm running it off of this until I put an alternator on it. Now, it is a relatively heavy vehicle for a small vehicle. It's just one person who weighs 160 pounds short of being 2 tons. It's relatively heavy, but that makes it ride stable. And this one is a conventional rear wheel drive. Very stable drive you get out of the thing. It's got a 5-speed electronic automatic transmission that's seamless. And as we check the trunk, baby's got a lot of room in the trunk. Now, some of it is for the top that pops down in there, but it's still got a reasonable amount of room in the trunk. Because look, this one has a spare standard transmission in it. I guess the guy's thinking about trying to swap it over to a standard transmission. Now, that's something I don't advise doing. Too much work. Now, since the battery light's on, it's not charged anymore, we're going to change the alternator so we can give it a better road test, see what kind of shape it's in. So I'll take all this plastic crap out of the way so we can have working, and we'll disconnect the battery cable so we don't short anything out. Now, the alternator's way down there, so we'll put our 14mm socket and giant cheater bar, and we'll pull it and we can get the fan belt out of the way. As you can see, now we can get the fan belt off the front of the alternator. That's clear, and we can jack it up in the air to get the alternator off. Kind of a dumb design, but that's how it is. So up it goes! Now you gotta go under the car. We moved the plastic crappy cover out of the way, and there's the alternator. There's just 2 bolts you take off, that one and that one. Then slide it off and take the electronics off. So off comes this one, and off comes the bottom one. And there it goes. Now, it's been stuck in there for quite some time, so I'm getting this big hammer. I'm gonna give it a few whacks to try to loosen it. But wouldn't you know it, the power steering pulley's in the way here. So we gotta unbolt the power steering pump pulley and then pull that out of the way. That stupid thing was blocking it, not the greatest design. Then with a bunch of wiggling, out comes the old alternator. Before we do all that work to put it back together, we'll check them. The new one's got 3 in 1, 3 in 1. Looks exactly the same, so we'll slide it back in. Now, don't forget to plug the electrical plug in here and bolt on the big 12-volt power wire. I can't film it, there's no working room under here. That's the one thing I do have to say about the V8 Lexuses. They are much harder to work on, the parts do cost more money. Realize that if you're buying one. For example, the brake master cylinder is a fancy system that's got all kinds of electronics. Some of these master cylinder assemblies for these V8 Lexuses can be $1,700 just for the parts. My wife's Lexus about the same year, but it's a 300, a V6. I can get a brake master cylinder for $159. Just realize they are more expensive to fix. You can do it yourself like this. You can see it's a do-it-yourself job if you want to get dirty and take all the stuff apart. But realize things will cost more. Then of course, don't forget to put the power steering pulley back on that we had to take off in order to get to the stuff. Then you get a picture and put the fan belt back on. I got this online, all data. If you don't have a picture, take a picture of it with your camera on your phone before you take it apart so you know where the belt goes back on. Use our giant cheater bar and a socket, and when we pull it, we can snap the belt on. Not easy to film, but as you can see in the picture, you route it around and then you put the top pulley belt on. Once you have that all loosened up, the top one will snap right on. Then before you put all that plastic crap back together, put the battery on, start it up, see if it's working. Put it back on, and in this case, jump started because the battery's still dead. It has to recharge. And as we look inside, we can see the belt's running straight, everything's working. Alternator light's not any on. But the low fuel light is, so I'm gonna have to put some gas in. And here's a tip. If you don't want to annoy your mechanic, don't give them a car where the fuel light's on and it's out of fuel. We find it very annoying. Now we'll take it for a spin, see how it does. And put some more gas on it. It needs a ton. Now, as you can see, it's idling very smoothly. We're gonna take it on the highway. And it's hot, so I turn the air conditioning on. Let's step on it and see what happens. Now it gets up and goes, unlike before. All that loss of power is gone. It was all because the electrical system wasn't sending enough power. That's why it was running poorly. We'll start at the bottom of the hill here and take off. Away it goes. You can hear that V8 cranking up. Car still handles quite well, nice and zippy. Hey, a fun car for $6,500. A nice, quiet running, smooth looking sports car. $6,500. As long as you realize if something major goes wrong, you're gonna have to shell out some serious bucks. But generally, they don't start falling apart till they get over 200,000 miles on them. And after all, this one's only got 156,000. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Tito Estevez says, our Toyota A6 manual is reliable, despite having a Subaru boxer engine. The manual transmissions are, and the engines aren't bad. They're not heavy horsepower racing engines, so they don't get that much strain. And truthfully, with Subarus, the real problem with Subarus have with their boxer engines are with the 6-cylinder ones, and they have higher horsepower, and they have all kinds of problems as they age. The 4-cylinder ones now don't really have that many problems. They're better built than they used to be. I still tell people, do not buy a 6-cylinder Subaru. I have customers over the last decade buying from 10 years ago to last year, and I'm not impressed, and over time, most of my customers weren't impressed with them either. Emmanuel Gonzalez says, when I turn my steering wheel, car makes a noise. What can it be? 2011 Nissan Altima. What kind of a noise is it? If it goes blah, 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 and you have mechanical power steering with power steering fluid, you could just be low on fluid. If you have electronic power steering, it would be the electronic motor going out in the power steering. If it's not squealing but a clunk clunk, then you got something wrong in your front end. Then you got to jack the car up in the air, pull on the wheel, see if you got bad ball joints, tie rods, check a whole bunch of stuff. Crush on Tie says, Scotty, any idea how to improve suspension on a sedan to make it ride more comfortable? What you want to do is get the best riding shocks or struts that you can buy. Quality companies have various levels, and you tell them what you want. You say, I don't want a stiff ride, I want a smoother ride. And they can sell you a strut that's got different kinds of springs, less stiffness to it, so it's smoother. It won't corner as well, but there's a lot of different ones out there. Go aftermarket and then talk to the different companies out there and say, okay, what do you make for this? What do you make for that? What kind of rebound do the springs have? I don't want them to be too tight. I want them a little looser. And they can tell you exactly what's out there, and you can decide what you want to put on. Steve Harris says, Scotty, how do you maintain your positive energy? All right, well, I live in a fantasy world, so I can be positive and be happy because I don't live in the real world. The real world's a nasty place. There's evil people out there doing bad things to each other, lying, cheating, and stealing. My wife already told me I lived in a fantasy world, and I said, yes, but I like my fantasy world. And at James Dean's grave, if you've seen that picture of me on James Dean's grave, hey, I still, in my mind, think I look like that. That's why I wear the sunglasses. I'm looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, and I'm going to remain that way, too. I'm not going to change. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.